Hang in
Dude,
there. It is.
that's Smylie Kaufman for 61. Wow.
I'm Smylie Kaufman, and this is The Smylie Show.
What's up, guys? Welcome back. We got a great episode in store for you today. For all you guys that are trying to get a head start on figuring out how to set your lineups, a little bit of gambling, wagering talk. Charlie, we got the man Keith Stewart joining us. This was a great episode.
Yeah, I love that this is the way we've kind of chosen to go with the off season, where we've done. You did a version of this a couple months ago with Adam Chernoff on the football side, and I think you and I both enjoyed that process so much that we said, hey, can we get someone on the golf side to do the same sort of thing? And so Keith Stewart, who is a still a PGA professional, but a actual green grass PGA pro in a previous sort of iteration of his job, now a founder of Read the Line. You can find all of his stuff at readtheline.com, and a golf betting expert, also a SportsGrid contributor. So great to be a teammate with him at SportsGrid. But Keith has gone through this process, is on site for so many of these big tournaments. Really looking at the way guys are practicing and playing, looking at the golf courses with his knowledge as a PGA professional, and giving just real high level golf gambling insights. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing about his process.
Yeah, and similar to where a lot of people come onto the show to listen to my insights and my access and what I've seen, I feel like Keith Stewart also brings that, but he brings it to the gambling side. So it's a really nice blend and a good mix, and a really cool way to figure out, just like you said, his processes on how he figures out who's going to play well each and every week.
Yeah, just like people come to the show to hear me talk about Hope Valley Thursday Night Men's League and watch me dance to minimal house music. It's all the same. All those things are just exactly the same.
Tomato.
What do you think? Yeah, I don't think there's any more of an intro that's needed. It's Keith Stewart, again, of Read the Line, readtheline.com. Let's get everyone over to that conversation right now.
All right, guys, welcome back. We have Keith Stewart, as we just talked about, joining the show. Read the Line, premium golf betting platform, and a SportsGrid contributor. So we're happy to have one of our own here joining the show. Keith, it's kind of cool too. PGA background. You have definitely a golf industry understanding, but I think the gambling stuff too is something that Charlie and I really love to get into in this interview. And Keith, thank you for your coming in.
Oh, Smylie, Charlie, it's fantastic to get together in the fall and continue to talk about golf betting. I mean, I know football dominates the headlines when it comes to all of that, but we can get ready for 2025 in a number of ways, and I'm sure we'll get into it. But we've crossed paths so many times out there on the road together. It's great to sit down and to get into it. So thanks for having me on, guys.
Oh, it's great to have you here, Keith. And Smylie kind of notes there, PGA Professional, award-winning PGA Professional for a number of years. You were the head pro at Springdale Golf Club in New Jersey. And so here's where we got to start, Keith. Before we dig into all the gambling, before we, help everyone make some bucks this year in 2025 on the PGA Tour, Smiley's fresh off a trip up to Stamford, Connecticut for work, and got to tee a few times up there in the greater New York area. By the way, side note, Smiley's game trending. A lot of confidence happening there. We love to see that. All right. But here's where I want to go, because we had a little bit of this discussion.
I'll make a note.
Yes, please make a note of that. That actually can come in handy for an upcoming gambling guy. Sprinkle a little cash on Smylie next time you see him tee it somewhere. But here's where I want to go first, Keith, is what is your Mount Rushmore of Northeast golf courses?
It's
a tough one, right?
Coming out hot.
Yeah.
Jeez. All right, let's not overthink this.
Okay.
I'm going to go Pine Valley right off the bat. Done that a dozen times or so. Really, really cool spot. Fishers, I love the water. You got to talk about, Fishers probably has 16 holes on the, I'm referring to Fishers Island up there off the coast of Connecticut.
Oh, of course.
Well, I don't know who's listening.
Yeah.
It's a nice flex, Keith. It's just Fishers to Keith. All right.
New York City area. So I won't say the country club. I'll say New York City area. Whew, man, oh man.
It's tough.
Somerset Hills.
Oh, okay.
I've always said if I was going to join a club where I would walk every day, it would be Somerset Hills, because you can do it. You could just walk it every day. It's right there in the New Jersey, like right outside New York City, so you can get to it very easily. and one more. I might chisel off a face because I'm happy with those 3, but one more in the Met area. Golly.
Anything out towards like the Hamptons, like Shinny, National? Are those making the cut for you, or?
You know what? I once had a hole-in-one at East Hampton, so I'll go there. Shinnecock for sure. Haven't played it though, so I can't really. All these places I've played, so I'm sticking to that. Wingfoot never lets me down. Ridgewood. I mean, there's just so many. It's God's country for golf courses, I mean, it's champagne problems up here. Where are we going to go? What are we going to do? We're like, I'm skipping over like Baltusrol. Like that doesn't matter, Yeah. I mean, I'm really good with any of them. So yeah, that's good.
Keith, give us just a bit of a background and how you made the transition from being a PGA professional into, building your own business. That's something that most pros or the country club talk is about. Hey, who do you like this week? I'm sure that's a conversation that comes up a lot, but where did the business idea come from? And how many years into the profession did you make that transition?
So, a real quick summary on this. 25 years ago, I was a golf professional at a place called Isleworth Country Club, and it had a huge impact on my career. It's down there in Windermere, Florida. It was very popular at the time. I was there from 98 to 03, and we had one member in particular that was pretty good at golf. One Mr. Tiger Woods. And when that boom hit, guys, I was there in the golf shop, and Smylie, you bring up a good point. Someone always walks in, they're always talking about the current events in golf. And as that boom was taking place, it was a very affluent club, and there was a lot of people that were diving into golf and trying to figure out different ways to make money and build businesses and do different things. And that could be instruction. It could have been the Golf Channel, So like all of these different things were going on, and I had this really unique kind of microscopic view of like what would succeed if there was another golf boom. So I didn't have the means or basically the time or the motivation at that point in my career. I was like, I'm going to be a PGA pro, head golf professional, do all these things. But I always kind of thought to myself, like an undercurrent in my career was like, if there's ever going to be like another huge boom like this, I'm going to come up with an idea because I've seen the best practices and the worst practices of who failed and who succeeded, right? So 25 years later, the Golf Channel's still there. There's still other golf institutions that came out back there in the late 90s that are still around, and then there's ones that went away very quickly. So fast forward to COVID, golf explodes. I'm a golf professional. I'm born and raised in New Jersey. I'm here in the state, and Governor Chris Christie is pushing very hard for mobile sports betting. And of course, on May 24th of 2018, PASPA gets repealed, and then that's up to the states. And New Jersey was one of the first states to do it. And I said, you know what? Golf betting is so much fun that I'm going to build a business around this because it's brand new. So I don't have to compete with training aids or technology in golf or anything else. TrackMan. I go, this whole thing is brand new. And with my golf background, I'm going to take off on this thing and we'll see what happens. I mean, at the end of the day, I could always go back to being a green grass operator. I mean, I know how to handle frost delays. So they'll be waiting for me. They'll always be there.
Yeah, and lightning delays, I'm sure, down at Isleworth. So, but frost delays up in New Jersey.
So I built this business 3.5 years ago, and I made a couple, really kind of strategy decisions from the beginning. One was to maintain my PGA status. Number two was to travel with the tour. And that's how we've run into each other. I always see you like inside the ropes there, just like running down, going from one group to another, hopping in your cart or whatever. If I'm with your group or whatever group I'm with, and being on site, you and I see things that are extremely helpful when it comes to wagering on golf. And then, the third thing was that to try to use like my golf background to put more golf in golf betting. And it's been successful for 3 years, and I've had a lot of fun doing it.
Keith, I find that transition so interesting because if you think about the game of golf and specifically being a PGA professional, there are a lot of processes. You can be very process oriented, whether you're running the operational side of a club and you kind of have your checklist of things every day, or on the instructional side, here's what you're doing prior to hitting a shot, and you're kind of going through routines.
Good grip.
And so then you kind of take that a step further and you think about going into kind of the gambling side of golf, right? And everyone has a different sort of process of how they're gathering information each week and what their key metrics are. So we've talked a number of times on the show. We have a very scientific process called the data gut process. Okay, so that means I go to Data Golf and I look at a bunch of stuff, and then I just check in with my gut. Who do I like this week? And then we just throw out some picks. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Here's what I'm curious on your side of things, because obviously I think your process is a little more refined than ours. On a week-to-week basis, what does your research process look like? What are you looking for? Is it core stats? Is it specific, the specific metrics you're looking at so you can decide, hey, here are the guys I really, really like this week?
It's a great question because there's different ways to approach this. A lot of people love the analytics side. I'm still a golf professional. So if I was coaching Smylie as a PGA coach, I would approach him going into the golf tournament and us trying to win it together as a team the same way that I approach, betting on golf. And to date, this system's worked great because I've picked 36 winners outright, in the last 3 seasons. So we're doing all right. We like
that.
Yeah, the trend is our
Good
friend.
Stats.
So I've got a million sayings, but one of my favorite ones is that odds are like sucker pins. Right. So today when we're recording this, it's a Monday. Right. So the odds drop comes out for the Zozo Championship. And when that happens, if the first thing you do is go to the odds board, they have you. The books, the official betting operators, the FanDuels of the world, they have you. So I believe odds are like sucker pins. The first thing I do is what a golf professional would do. I go look at the golf course. Or if I was a player, or if I was a coach, I go look at the golf course. And if we have history there, that's great. If it's a couple weeks ago and it's the Black Desert Championship, then I still want to go look at it. I'm looking at the golf course. I'm looking actually at the scorecard. What does it take to actually play good here? And then in my mind, because I've been out on tour for 20 plus events this year each year for the last 3 years, I have this Rolodex of who's good at those things. And in my mind now, I've got about 15 to 20 guys in my head that I'm like, okay, recently, they've been on leaderboards. These guys are good, but okay, what's the agronomy? What's the architecture? What's the skill set? What is the golf course? What is necessary this week to get all this done? So now I'm about 2 levels into my process, right? I've got the golf course, I've got the agronomy, and then I've got a couple of names. I've got probably a large group of names of who I'm going to look at. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go, okay, horses for courses. These names that I'm interested in, have they played here good? Have they played well here before? Right. So we're going to Bay Hill and it's Tiger, oh yeah, Tiger's played good here before, but who else has played good there? We're going to Shriners and I know that in 2015, Smylie won there. Right. And he's still playing out on tour. And I'm like, all right, well, why did he win there? What made that, what made that 61 happen on that magical Sunday for him? So I'm looking at those little details again at this point, other than leaderboards and the golf course. I haven't looked at anything strokes gained. Right. I'm just trying to come up with a really short list of about a dozen names that just play well at these places that are playing well now. And then I'm going to go over to strokes gained and I'm going to say, okay, I need to confirm with the analytics, whether it's Data Golf or whoever you want to mine your analytics from. And then now I'm going to look and I'm going to confirm in my mind, does this validate what I'm thinking? And there's always outliers in that phase of the process every time. There are people that pop up and I'm like, wow, I didn't know that guy was he was really good here. Or, wow, there was 2 guys there that I had that have been awful here for whatever reason. They've never made a cut. And it's like, whoa, that seems kind of crazy. And then once I have that list down to about 6 or 8 names, the last thing I'll do, the 5th thing I'll do in that process is go to the odds board and I'll sit there and then I'll look and I'll say, okay, well, who has the best value? So I write for Golf Digest and we do an odds drop video and article every Monday. And it's who's the best value and who's the worst value? I'll go to last week, Shriners. Tom Kim, I wrote him as the worst value. I said, I don't think his value is very good because he is so short. And what are the odds of him winning 3 times in a row? He played okay at the President's Cup. I was up there in Montreal. There was a lot of emotion surrounding him, but his golf was just kind of average for the 24 guys that were there, And I look at that and then I'll write about somebody who I think is a great value, somebody that's in that 30, 40, 50, maybe 60 or 70 range that I think's trending, has the course history, and then they pop. So if I just pulled out my phone and we all were meeting up on a Monday at whatever course we were at, and I just showed you the odds board, your eyes would be drawn like David Blaine's doing a trick in front of you on TV, right? It's just sleight of hand. They are putting numbers in there specifically to make you bet on certain people because they know who the hot button topics are on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, or who you guys are talking about, or who we're hearing about, from the different pundits. And those odds are always targeted to get more people to bet on them or the favorites. And you got to stay away from that. You got to do your homework first. And then from there, you build out sort of where you think you're going to go and then confirm it in the end and find the best value on the odds board. So that's my process in, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes or less.
Well, Keith, I love that process. If yours is 4 or 5 minutes, I try to keep it to a similar process, except mine's probably closer in the 20-second range. So I'm like, yeah, okay, these are my guys, and then we're making our picks. But in all of the years you've been doing this, and you run this process, and who would be a player or two that comes to mind that you feel like maybe the sports books are considerably undervaluing them week after week? Is there a player or two that come to mind?
I mean, the most recent one I can think of was Wyndham Clark. So I hit Wyndham at Wells at 75, and it was a famous story because I had him the week before at Mexico. Vidanta Vallarta used to be the week before Quail Hollow 2 years ago, the year that Wyndham goes and wins the U.S. Open. And I felt really good. He had a couple top tens at that point. It was building. Wyndham goes, and he's not very good at Mexico. And I said, you know what? Now I'm down at Quail. I'm there, and I see him on the range. I'm like, man, this guy is absolutely striping it. He's a perfect fit for here. He can roll the rock really well, which is one of those like secret skills that you need at Quail. A la, PGA Championships coming this year, so pick the putters. But the point being was that like he was like 80-1 now. So I take him, we win, great. Okay, he gets to the U.S. Open. He had just won a signature event, and he was still 80-1 in the U.S. Open. Fast forward, his fall, he goes to Rome. Maybe he didn't play great at Rome, but like we start the year off again. He's in signature events. When he won, people had him at 100-1 at Pebble when he won there after 54 holes. By the time he got to the Players' Championship and he loses on that lip out, he was 55-1 that week. So to me, that was like, all right, well, maybe like he's won a major, he's won signature events. This guy's pretty good, but his odds never seem to quite reflect it as much as we have biases for our heroes. Whereas like one of your buddies, Smylie, like a Jordan, the number is never very high. No matter how bad he's playing or how much he's struggling, right?
Because people want to bet on Jordan. It's like, betting on the Cowboys. You just want to bet on a team that you root for.
Yeah. So to answer your question, a guy that I think of all the time that is always undervalued, that is a name that people know of that's won a major recently, is Wyndham.
And Keith, I'm curious also in a different part of the evaluation you're doing for betting is how big of a factor you think agronomy plays in this. And I just think back to last year where we're making the turn of the new year and we're raising the alarm bells once again for Scotty Scheffler and his putting early in the season. Smylie kept saying, get him to Bermuda, get him to Bermuda. If he gets to Bermuda, he's going to be fine. And lo and behold, he goes, he rips off a ton of wins. And Scotty Scheffler now, we feel like the putting is fixed, so to speak.
It's
right?
It's a West Coast Poana, man. It's just some guys, but it doesn't make sense too, Charlie. In this, is that like Xander Schauffele, you would think it's in San Diego, Torrey Pines, that would be a perfect match, and he never plays good there. So it's kind of weird sometimes.
And I guess that's what I'm curious about, Keith. Is like, do you have, in the same way that you have a horse for a specific type of course, do you guys have like a Bermuda stable and a bent stable and a Poe stable, and you're looking at guys who are going to putt well on specific surfaces?
100%. Just like I know who the good pitchers are, who the good chippers are. When we feature, around the green acumen that week, I know who those guys are. Agronomy plays a bigger role, certainly in the middle tier, and as you go further down the board for the long shots. So if you start playing, DFS, and you're looking for guys in that 6,000 range or 7,000, so daily fantasy sports, and you're playing on DraftKings, and you're looking for some of those longer guys, they are very regional in their success. And you can win a lot of money by being smart about, taking the West Coast guys on the West Coast. They just always seem to play well. And it has a lot to do with their familiar. I mean, golf's a game of comfort. The more confident you are is based upon how you feel about walking up to the golf course. So, when you're sitting there and you're looking at why does Max Hulme and Sahith Theegala all play good in California? Well, they grew up in California, right? Like they're just used to it. They're used to everything about it. They're used to everything from the time to the way that the golf course is performed, to the winds, to the air, to everything about it, right? And the same thing when you go down to Florida. Those guys are all used to putting to the rip, they just know Bermuda grass. And that level, that 1 or 2% of comfort. Now, the top 10 players in the world, it's not as big a deal. The structure of the golf course is a much bigger deal, like the architecture and then what skill set it calls for. But the agronomy, not as big a deal. But when you get down into the middle tier and the lower tier and the long shots, by all means, you better pay attention to agronomy.
That's one of the hardest things I have, Keith, when people ask me, he's like, hey, do you like John Rahm this week? Do you like Rory McIlroy this week? Do you like Scotty Scheffler this week? I have a much easier time determining in almost the open events, the opposite field events, the regional type events, the signature events to me, and sometimes even the majors. I think it's really tough to identify of the top players who's going to play poorly.
100%. And when you take away the cut, it gets even more difficult because now you can pace yourself throughout the course of 4 days and you don't have anything to worry about on a Friday. And I know that some of those events do have a cut, but they're only losing like 10 guys. And those aren't usually the guys that you're asked to report on, Smylie.
You shouldn't, right? I mean, sometimes every now and then it happens.
But like you and I are essentially, and Charlie, we're splitting hairs. Right? Like, why am I picking Scotty over Xander in this one event when they both like?
It's hard. I seriously like. Is that when you go more into the data and the stats when it comes to? Because I mean, Xander does have a weakness. Scotty's weakness, you would say, would be his putter. But yeah. I mean, when you have looking at a head-to-head matchup between Scotty and Xander, is that like, are you just not recommending anyone ever play that sort of play? Or I'm just curious on how you would recommend to play the top players.
So it really helps that I'm there, right? When you think about it, go to there's going to be a game at LSU at night on a Saturday night, Smylie, right? Mm-hmm. There are no handicappers there working for any massive publications. Like I work for Golf Digest and we work for SportsGrid, right? Like there's nobody like that there. There's nobody at a football game handicapping like what cleats they're wearing, what the grass field is like, what's the weather today. I mean, these are outdoor sports and so is golf, right? So we're going into Muirfield Village. Xander's already won the major, right? Scotty is on his roll. I'm there on property. I'm watching them both hit balls. And for some reason, Scotty just looks way more comfortable than Xander does. So we get into the press room and there's only certain questions that from a handicapping perspective, because of the 8-page PDF on integrity that the PGA Tour, I'm probably the only one that's ever read it, but not the only person that had to sign off on it. But the point being is that like, I get in the press room and I said to Xander, I said, just out of curiosity, I said, you've never had any top 10s here. Like, why is that? Because I have to find a reason why. Smylie, because the people that are coming to me and expect me to bring value to their weekend wagers and to their betting card and helping them diversify the different types of wagers that they're going to put together and do everything. At some point, they want me to split those two. And it might just be because they're going to do 100 DFS lineups and they go, well, if 51% of them or 60% of them go Xander and Xander wins over Scotty, well, then they're going to win a lot of money in those contests, right? So I have to split hairs all the time. So being on property at the biggest events has been a huge key for me. So I asked Xander that question. And he goes, I've never had a top 10 here. And I didn't counter him because it's Xander and I'm nobody, right? So I'm sitting there and then one of the PGA Tour comms guys is like, no, he shakes his head and he's like, oh, good on you. And I was like, oh, I'm just curious, like why, like you're a great long iron player. You're a great scrambler. You're a great putter. Like you're a great driver. You're great at everything. And you just won your first major. You should be like on cloud 9. Why should I pick you this week is basically what I was saying. And why haven't you done good here before? So like, those are the ways I find edges. I mean, you're really not going to find them in the numbers. You would dig so deep into the minutia
make your head spin.
Well, yeah. Well, at some point, stats can always convince you of something. I can meld any numbers to get Charlie to bet on anybody. Or like if you guys are head to head and Charlie texts me and he goes, I gotta beat Smylie in one and done. Give me a guy this week, right? I could take any number and make it compelling, right? And that's what people tend to do, and a lot of the pundits tend to do. And you can see these trends take off, and then you go like, well, okay, like everybody would thought Scotty was going to be great at Pinehurst, right? What's Scotty's superpower, guys?
Hitting it pin high.
You got it. His approach game is second to none, right? Well, okay. When everybody had to hit to the same exact spot on the green, now it became what? A putting contest. That's definitely not his superpower. And like, if you saw the golf course and you were there and you saw how crispy it was and you were like, oh man, this is going to be a problem for Scotty. this is going to be a huge issue, right? Like a huge for him, meaning like he'll finish 10th instead of first, right? But like that, if you're having that conversation now, hey, is it going to be Bryson or Rory or Xander or Scotty this week or Rahm or what's going to happen? Like those are the little things that happen. And so much of that comes from being there or just understanding the game in general and playing at a high level and teaching at a high level.
For that reason, applying what we're talking about here towards how people can go out and gamble, if you're a golf sicko like we are and like many of our listeners and viewers are, is it more of a high, like are you better off trying to target opposite field events or lower profile events that aren't signature events or majors, or right now the season we're in right now, the fall season, where maybe I'm not saying that Vegas is setting odds like they don't know what they're doing. Of course they know what they're doing. To your point, they're setting up sucker pins for you. But is it easier if you're watching all the golf and consuming all the golf news to kind of have a better gut feel about a guy you like in some of these events with weaker fields than it is when everybody has eyeballs on a major or a signature event?
I mean, majors are tough other than Augusta because they don't have any history. History is a really, really helpful predictor, right? I mean, Augusta National is the most predictive golf course that they play on the PGA Tour every year. And why is that? Because the same guys play the same place under the same exact conditions, right? Even if it's like windy, it seems like Augusta plays the same way, and that's really what it comes down to, Charlie. Right? Like if we're going to go bet the Black Desert Championship and we have a bunch of like middle tier guys, right? That's going to be much harder than trying to figure out Bay Hill or Augusta or places that they've been like time and time again, where we have data that really helps. So like data is really not so much the player data, but what the players do there, the types of shots that they hit. Most people don't understand what strokes gained means. It means it's the separation. It's the edge that I have for those types of shots that I hit. So basically what it's saying is like, when I hit the fairway, do I hit it further and straighter than the other guys, right? So if you're gaining in those areas, or if the golf course is telling you need to gain in those areas, then that's the direction you need to go. And some people just look at those numbers and go, well, that's a high number there. Well, like, but does it help them separate, right? If it's a wedge fest like the Shriners, right? All the PGA Tour players are good with wedges. You guys know. I mean, they all are. It's like a prerequisite to being there. It's like your driver's license to get in a car, right? Like they're all great with their wedges. What's going to separate them there? Well, if you look back over the last 5 years, the average winners have gained strokes, with their flat stick, like 7 strokes against the field. Well, like, okay, so this is like, it's pretty important to putt. Okay, what's the agronomy for putting? What types of putts are we going to see? And then, you start to be able to break it down that way. I at times, I think I almost use strokes gained more to learn more about the golf course than I do to learn about the golfers. We all know who's playing well at the time that they're playing well, because those are the names that we hear when we tune in and we hear Scotty or you guys talking on your podcast. That person's probably a guest. That person, these are the folks that we're talking about. Strokes gained can be a very, very valuable tool when you use it to understand the actual golf course.
And Keith, I think one of the most difficult things right now to figure out is, so we go, we start the year in Hawaii, and next thing you know, it's the lead up until the Masters. And it feels like whether it's handicappers or just general bettors, they start to get a feel on which PGA Tour players are playing well and where their price should be for the major championship, being the first one of the year, being the Masters. I've found that when we get to these majors now, it's really tough for me to know exactly how the live players are playing, because number one, I haven't watched them. Number two, I see their scores, but then I also see, relative to when they did leave the tour, where I perceive their value should be in the event. But the value always seems to be lower for these live guys. And it's kind of screwed me up a little bit in my one and done strategy, because I feel obligated to take live players. But honestly, I always seem to tell people, is like, hey, who do you like in the majors? And my first thing I say to them is, well, I like this guy and this guy from the tour, but I feel like these 3 or 4 live guys are undervalued.
Well, I mean, if you want to cut sharp, you better take care of your knives, right? Like, I mean, Xander won majors this year because week after week, he was competing against the best player in the world. So at the end of the day, your point is extremely warranted, Smylie. And anyone else that's trying to compare John Rahm to again, Scotty at that point, or even a Colin Morikawa. I mean, Colin Morikawa is a better golfer week to week because he's going against Xander and Scotty in 2024, rather than Tyrrell Hatton going against John Rahm in a 54-hole, stroke play event, but on a much easier golf course, right? There's no golf course they play on Live off the top of my head that I could think of in the last 3 years that would compare to a Muirfield Village. And when Colin finishes runner-up there to the best player in the world and takes that guy to task, I mean, then he's ready to go to a major championship. Like we could go off on a tangent about all that stuff. And I don't want to go there, but to answer your question, like the fact that those guys in those signature events are battling each other week after week under difficult conditions and trying to beat the best player in the world makes them better. It's a testament to somebody like Bryson that showed up in those first 3 majors and was so well prepared and so confident in himself, right? In many ways, I almost think that's more due to YouTube and people accepting him than anything else. Like he was just dying for acceptance, and then he got it. And the next thing you know, the guy's carrying the cross across the fairway at the Masters, but he's like the people's champion, like he's the Rock.
He's got more. There needs to be a case study on Bryson DeChambeau somehow becoming more popular, leaving the tour, because when he was on tour, it wasn't that way. So you make a great point. And a quick follow up on that. Would you attribute Jon Rahm going to Live Golf and just not being in that normal schedule that he's accustomed to in the lead up to the Masters, and why he got off to such a poor start in the majors? It seemed like he got better as the year went on, the Open Championship and other events past that. But, man, he looked like a completely different player at Valhalla.
Well, I think we would all agree to this. A grip on your club's like a grip on your world. And I think Jon Rahm went over there thinking that whole thing was like him being Jon Rahm was going to like bring this whole framework thing together. And when that didn't happen, it became very unsettling to him. And now I think that really jammed up his golf game and his confidence. I think it was all related to the fact that John is a fantastic ambassador for the game. He's fiery when he needs to be. He is a great spokesperson for the game when he needs to be. He was upfront about a lot of things. I have all the respect in the world for him as a player, but also as a guy that, as a PGA pro, I never had a problem with like Jon Rahm being representative of the PGA Tour or golf in general. Like I was like, man, this guy is, I don't know if I'm the biggest Rahm fan in the world, but I was like, this guy's good for the game, whatever. When he flipped over, it kind of threw everyone for a loop. Now, for the first time in his life, he was getting like Greg Norman type feedback, right? He was getting hate mail, right? He was getting that sort of stuff. And that jams you out. Like nobody wants we don't want that, like if you guys get a nasty DM or something, So like, I think that and then you go into an event where Jon Rahm started in 23, he had 4 wins, including the Masters, right? To start his year off. Right. So he was the favorite single digit number going into the PGA. I mean, he was on cloud 9. And then a year later, it was a total disaster. Like it wasn't his game. There was something else had to be there in my mind, and I look at that a lot when I'm on property. Like, how does what's his body language like with his coach? Are they arguing with one another? Are they working on something? Or is the coach like kind of like talking to the caddy and they're looking at playlists and stuff, oh yeah.
That's actually a great indication on where a guy's at. When you see player and coach and they're, dialed in, like, talking after every shot, that's when you're like, all right, these guys are grinding. But when they're looking at their phone at the latest meme that they've seen on Instagram, that's when that guy's in a good spot.
Well, like a perfect example of that is your happy hour. Smylie, right? Whoever came up with the idea, great idea. But those guys that sit there, not all of them are comfortable. I mean, you know that because you're the host. You're sitting there with them, right? But the guys that are more comfortable, they tend to play well in that event. I'm just talking that specific event. Like you've taken them out of their element, put them on TV on a national broadcast, and then the weekend they still finish top 10. That to me is a guy who's very comfortable with his golf game right now because again, a grip on your club is like a grip on your world.
Happy hour bump. That's like a happy hour bump. The Smylie Show bump there, Charlie.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's cashed in a number of times this year. That's another little gambling trend people need to pay attention to. Who's sitting in that seat with Smylie on Fridays?
I pay attention.
To keep pulling the Rahm yarn a little bit, because I think it's an interesting one that we've gone back to a number of times this year. And we were just looking at that last major of the year and just what he had to finish out on Live with individual championship, team championship. Finishes, I believe it was 7th or tied for 7th at the Open Championship, and then goes on to win a couple Live events, individual championship. What do you feel like in Rahm's mind, if you have to get inside his brain?
Oh boy.
What sort of grade do you think he's given himself for this last year? And what do you think he needs to do in 25 to make it feel like it's a success if this last year was not one?
Ah, man, grades are tough. I would say pre-Olympics, Rahm would have said, hey, you know what? Due to Royal Troon, I'm trending up. Post-Olympics, he doesn't care. Right? Like he's at a point where like he could have won every single event on Live. He doesn't care. He had a 5-shot lead with 8 to go.
Insane.
For a gold medal, which is, we have found out to be a big deal to these guys, right?
5-shot lead with 8 to go. Is that, I don't even remember it being that traumatic, but when you say it like that,
it was insane.
Smylie, I bet him. I know.
Oh,
okay. All right.
I think I picked him a one and done too. I think that's not as hard as but that is that. It was.
Yeah, I had Rahm and Lydia. So like one cool thing, I also handicap the ladies too every week. Right. So this week my attention's over in Malaysia with them. And then, of course, it's over in Japan with the men. Right. So I had Lydia going for the gold, which was probably one of the coolest golf stories you're ever going to get. 3 Olympics, 3 medals, all 3 different medals. Right. But Rahm was mystifying to me. I mean, he was the only guy out of the bad wave that finished in the top 10 or top 8 or whatever it was. Like there was a statistic for that. Like that guy played unbelievable at Royal Troon. Le Golf National was set up perfect for him. If you don't know, go watch the Ryder Cup from 2018, right? Like it was set up perfect for him, right? And he had the lead and then it just went away. And it was like, what just happened there? Something happened there. And I don't know if we can rely on that going forward on weekends.
Does it surprise you the way that like the 180 some of these guys have done, from Rory not wanting to play in 2016 to talking about how much it meant to him here in 2024, just the way these guys have embraced the Olympics? Because I think from a fan perspective, it's super cool to feel like there's another, I don't know if you call it a major, but another marquee event that's right up there with the players maybe in terms of significance for these guys.
I think everything just takes time. And once the field's filled out with really good golfers, like it did here for Le Golf National. Yeah, 30 of those guys over there weren't necessarily signature status, but 30 were. And that gave us like another major. It almost in a way made the leaderboard better than what we were going to get at the Players this year. And the Players was phenomenal, and it's one of the deepest fields in all of golf. But we really want those Rahms to take on the Rorys and the Scotties of the world. I mean, that's what we're signing. I mean, nobody's looking for 2 middle of the road baseball teams at this point in the year. We have Dodgers, Yankees, right? People are happy about that, right? This the same thing with the SEC football. I mean, look what's going on there, the mess that it's become, right? But it's really not a mess to the fans, to the fans of specific schools, but like that's what we want all the time. We want Georgia to go from Alabama, then to play LSU at night, and then to go to Texas and do all of like this is what we want. And the Olympics gave us that. So I think that that's a big part of it. I also think that anytime you start to make comparisons to the Ryder Cup or the President's Cup and playing for the front of the jersey versus the name on the back, you're going to start to get some fandom, some passion behind it. And I think those guys like playing for passion too.
And Keith, to make a transition back into the gambling side. So live betting has become a very popular way for many people to make their wagers. And with golf, you have the opportunity to wager live, but also, post the first round, live adjusted odds. Is that something that also you're able to provide insight on your site based off what you see out on the golf course after the first round? Because, sometimes when you get to through 36 holes and I look at the leaderboard and I'm like, man, I'm looking at these top 8 guys and I don't think any of these guys want to win this golf tournament. So what do you use as your guide? Do you still go to the golf course and maybe see, well, these 2 guys putted, through the roof. This is the best putting rounds they've had in their career. There's no way this is going to hold up.
Yeah, 100% live betting is certainly the way to either bolster a card for the week or to save a card. There's no doubt about it. And it also is a very, very good way. Like the guys train and they work on specific shots, like leading up to the Masters. It's a good way for me. Like, we're going from a signature event into a major, into another signature event. Wow, these 3 in a row. I'm going to do some live betting this weekend and see how these guys are actually performing. And I'll have some data there, not strokes gain data, but like head-to-head data. So as I go forward on these weeks, I can continue to win more and more. So people love live betting. Right. The trend continues to go in that direction. Well, we'll use a perfect example like the Super Bowl. People want to bet the Super Bowl live, right? It's 4 hours long. Well, the golf tournament's 4 freaking days. Like you have all the time in the world to adjust. And like, as well as anybody, Smylie, you get those 3 balls on Thursday. I don't do a lot of live betting on Thursday because I've done all of my pre-tournament betting on Wednesday. So when the newsletter comes out from Read the Line for the ladies and the men, it's sitting there. And I let basically Thursday kind of breathe. And then I come back with the Friday 5 and there's always adjustments there. And there's a video there that's like, and if I'm on site, it's like, hey, this is what I'm seeing here. The golf course is playing firm and fast, more than we thought to. Or the weather moved out. We're not going to get the weather we want. These are the guys for Friday. These are the guys for Saturday. These are the guys for Sunday, or the women if I'm at an LPGA event. And I'm telling you, you can make so much money, like head-to-heads live for the year. If I'm there, I'm over 70% right. For the year, I'm over 60% right. So you just see what's going on. A guy can't help if he's not playing well. And yes, the odds will reflect that somewhat, but there are opportunities, especially if you know what matches the golf course. Over the course of 4 days, you're going like, if you know what you're doing, if you're a golf geek like me, then you can figure it out, and then you can go and you can shop your odds, which is what's great about golf, and then you can totally make money.
I have a question about, okay, you have the guys you like for a weekly basis, right? And you're putting together a card and you're trying to determine how you're going to kind of execute the bets you want to play. So like looking ahead to the current Masters odds, you have a Scotty Scheffler who's like a 4-1 or a 5-1, depending on where you're looking. And you have an Adam Scott who's 130-1. If you're placing 10 units on both those guys who went outright, you're probably not doing it, right? Do you have like a rule of thumb in terms of units relative to odds, so you can kind of have a blend of risk to make sure that you're covered in any sort of direction?
Well, there's an old saying, people think gambling or betting is about winning. It's not. It's about winning money, right? So right. There's a lot of brave men I know that cash out. Is kind of the point, right? It's about, can you live to spend another day, right? Like, and if you just hold on to the bitter end all the time, or you're not managing your units properly. So quick PSA, if you're coming into any week, especially in golf, but of course at this point with the amount of prop bets that are available on baseball or football and the amount of games that you could bet in like a college slate on a Saturday, you got to start with a budget. So many times people go in and they're like, oh, I'm only making $5 bets. And then they look and they had $300 in their kitty, right, in their bank. And then they're like, they go to make the last bet. They're like, oh, this is my parlay of the day. I'm doing $10. And they're like, I have no money left. I'm like, well, you just did like 27 $5 bets. Like, how does that even work? Like simply just do the math. Everyone's like, oh, I'm taking Scotty, I'm taking Xander, and I'm taking Rory. I'm like, okay, well, if either of those guys win and you bet like 6 other things, you just lost money. Yeah, but they won. But you weren't listening earlier. It's about winning money, right? It's not about just winning, right? One and dones are about winning, right? That's a great strategy contest. They're tons of fun to do, right? But at the end of the day, betting is about putting together a diversified card that allows you with it inside of a budget. Definitely start with a budget that allows you to actually make money over the course of week after week after week. And you'll hit home runs from time to time, but any home run hitter will tell you that they strike out more than they hit home runs, right? And I'm wrong more than I'm right, but I've got 10 outright wins this year. And after, 1,000, I did the numbers this morning because it was a Monday. So Read the Line has posted on the men and women 1,138 individual bets this year in 2024, and we have a 19.1% net return. So if you bet every single one of those, for every $100 you gave me, I give you back 119 at the end of the year.
That's
right.
Great.
So
congrats,
pretty
man.
Good numbers.
That's impressive.
But a lot of that isn't very sexy at the end of the day, right? It's just, yes, I'm doing the work. I'm the filter. You read the newsletter. You follow me on social. You're going to get all these bets. You have to do the work of avoiding the kids' soccer game, and you're walking over and you're like, oh, I got to check my work email. And like you're hitting draft. I mean, come on. you know. It's either that or you saw someone else's folding chair and you're like, where did you get that? And you're checking for it, you know. But like, trust me, all right. Like, I'm a dad too. I'm just further down the road than you guys. And
you're speaking our language. Yeah, this is very helpful.
Like, you let me do all of that stuff, right? And then I'll make it as quick as I can for you to just go in, make the bets, and then over the course of the year, my job is to provide value and entertainment, but provide value. And I take that very, very seriously. No different than if you were paying me $10,000 a year to be a member at Springdale, the last club that I worked at, and I was in charge of your family and the golf operation.
And Keith, we've talked a lot about players that are playing well and trying to target guys who play well in certain courses, who are in form. But I think another strategy as well is that you're on the ground and you see guys that aren't playing good. How often do you try to target that in, whether it's matchups for the entire week or daily matchups? Is that something that you lean on pretty heavily when you see guys that are not in form?
I do. Yeah. And I certainly will. In this particular answer, I would never mention any names. I mean, the names come up when I post the bets, but there's always a trend. And if you're watching me week after week on social or you're reading me, you'll notice who it is I'm picking on. Right. Essentially, and I feel bad because they're not good now. They're world-class players. A lot of these guys are major winners, but they're struggling with their game for whatever reason. And as I walk the range, I could tell who's working and who's working. So who's got it working and who's working on it. Right. Like, and those are the places that you go after, because a lot of those popular people, if they are struggling, then the odds will sometimes work in your favor. You know, there's maybe a no-name guy that's paired with them. And then, you go for the no-name guy, you're going to get plus odds on a head-to-head matchup just because the other one's a name. And those are great value opportunities. But yeah, if there's somebody that's trending in the wrong direction, you'll see their name almost sometimes more often than you would see somebody who's playing well when you read the line.
And one other question when it comes to prop betting, Keith, this is something that you'll see a lot of people kind of scroll through, kind of fun to see. It's like, oh, okay, Vegas has got 21 under being the winner this week. They got the cut being at 4 under par, and they have hole in ones, yes, at minus whatever, right? So those are some fun props that most people look through at the beginning of the week. But there's also, I think, huge opportunities when you see, I think hole in one's a bit finicky, but predicting the winning score, when there's history at a golf course, and then predicting the cut line and being able to be at the golf course, knowing the conditions, but also knowing the weather pattern that's coming through that week. Is that something that you'll also maybe send out in the newsletter?
Oh, absolutely. And I talked about this a bunch last week. It was, but part of the content for all week was that on Mondays, I go look at golfodds.com, and they always post the over under for the winning score for the week. And last week, guess what? It was 15.5, Smylie.
In Vegas, it was 15.5.
It was 15.5.
Because they just thought the weather was.
Because they thought the weather was going to come in. Right. And the weather did come in.
It came in.
yeah. But the tour massaged the tee times around the weather, which we didn't know was going to happen. But over the last 5 years, the average winning score of that tournament was 23 under par, and it was 15.5. It should have been probably like 21.5, 20.5, something like that, if there was perfect weather, and it wasn't. So right away, red flag. So yes, there are opportunities on prop bets. If you look at the weather and they're talking about the number of balls in the water on 17 at Sawgrass, like, you have to pay attention to the things
direction
that I love to look at, the golf course conditions. Like, are we in a drought? Is this thing going to be super firm and fast this week? All right, well, I'm going to go to certain books that always do round scoring. I'm just going to start playing everybody over, right? Like, those are the types of things that everyone doesn't have time to do, but that's my job. And I take it very seriously. I have fun doing it. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm a self-admitted golf dork. I love to get into the golf courses and do all these things. I could sit and talk with you guys about this stuff for days, because this is what I choose to do with my life. And as a result, I want to provide value back to the people that read me. And we've been very fortunate so far to be able to do that. But the props are certainly nationality props. There's all sorts of interesting ones that you can get that really do make a difference in whether or not you'll win money that week.
Readtheline.com. I feel like you're giving us a lot of great stuff here, Keith. And this is something that I know I'm going to go sign up for the newsletter, because being on dad duty and having a little something where we can gain some extra information on a week-to-week basis, this has been fantastic stuff. I got to say, Keith, we'd be remiss in an interview about golf gambling to not bring up the 2024 Smylie Show one and done hot streak, which was, really fun ride for everyone who came along with us. Even got some play on NBC Golf Channel, so it's a little feather we put in our cap. I want to just get your viewpoint on how you construct one and done strategy, because it feels a little bit like an NFL eliminator pool, which at least for our Smylie Show pool, we were out week one. Not a great start for us in that respect this season, but just you kind of look at the whole landscape of the season. Are there certain places where I like certain guys? How do you go about constructing one and done strategy over a whole year? Because you can win a couple of weeks in a row playing a hot hand, but then you get to the end of the season and realize, oh, wait a second, I used all my good guys. Who am I going to go with now?
Well,
I overthought it so much.
The most important thing to think about is that what is the determining factor in one and done that allows you to win the contest? How is everyone measured? How is your contest run? Is it by dollars, or is it by FedEx Cup points?
FedEx Cup points.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was kind of workshop, just us two.
Yeah, that was kind of.
We kind of made our own rules as
Nothing
we
scientific.
went, to be honest.
No, this is good, right? Like, so whether it's dollars or FedEx Cup points, right? Different events are worth a different amount. So if I told you where Scotty Scheffler was going to win, he's going to win at the Amex and he's going to win at the Players, where would you pick him? Well, the Players is the largest purse, right? So the biggest PSA I can give to anyone that plays a one and done is, one, print out the schedule that has all the purse money, because it's all known, and make sure you save the big guns for the biggest purses, because even if they finish top 5 in a signature event, that's still like $2 million or $1.5 million versus some guy that goes and wins in Corrales. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, which is 800,000, like you, or the amount of points that you're going to get if you guys are using points in particular. So many people overlook that. They just go horses for courses, or they're saving people. You never know if someone's going to get injured or something like that. When the big money tournaments come up and a guy plays well there, my advice is to use them. Right. And my advice would be to use Scotty at the Players unless he's injured, because it's the biggest purse and he's the best player. I mean, so that's the methodology in a nutshell. That's what you should be doing in your one and dones.
Or even when he's injured, got a little neck problem, he gets a little massage, and just say he'll figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, I had Wyndham at 55-1, and that lip out still burns me right now. Yeah.
Oh man, well, you just talking about Wyndham earlier, you mentioned that you've seen some value in his card, throughout the year. You've made some nice plays on him on some long shots, but as we head into 2025, I'll let you take another shot here. Who are some players that you feel like can step out of their shadow a bit and kind of elevate their game? Maybe not to the level at which we've seen from Scotty and Xander this year. That's been quite remarkable what these two guys have done. But, who's in that, already really good category that you can feel can take that step to that elite category in 2025?
So I'm almost going to answer that like it's a trick question. I'm not going to pick somebody like you guys were talking with James last week about all of the up and comers, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not going to go down that road. I'm going to go down the road of guys that I know are proven winners that are in need of a comeback. Yeah. And there's four names in particular. And if you look at their odds right now for futures for the 4 majors, they are the biggest numbers you're going to see on Max Homa, Will Zalatoris, Cameron Young, and Jordan Spieth. These are the biggest numbers you're going to see on these people. These are also 4 people that I know that would probably chop off a toe in order to be at Bethpage in September and have Smylie walk in their group talking about their foursomes match, right? Like, the fact of the matter is that when someone asks me a question like that, I want to be super thoughtful about my answer. I know Max Homa is a proven winner. I saw what Max Homa went through with his driver this year out on tour, and I'm sure you guys did too. Mm-hmm. You see it live, you're like, oh man. But like, this guy, he's had a comeback before in his career, right? When he lost his card and he came back and he's won. The guy's a winner, like, look how he performed in Rome. Like those are the guys. Jordan's wrist hasn't been good for 2 years. You asked me the question, jokingly, he was one of those guys in head-to-head matchups I always went against because you never knew if his wrist was going to pop out or not. And if it did, he was done and you win the matchup. whether it was the third hole or it was 18 holes played, right? Like, it was just an easy guy in order to try to go after, right? Like, but when those guys come back, because they've bottomed out a little bit, they're going to come back better. When Will Zalatoris figures out his new golf swing, the first time I saw Will Zalatoris, 2014 in Houston, when he wins the junior, and he beat my student in the Sweet 16. And I was like, oh man, how good are these two kids, right? But like, how good is this Zalatoris kid, right? Like, and then look what he did in those majors. Will's going to get back to that, but he spent a whole year like I don't know who's changed their swing more this year, Daniel Berger or him, but both of them had huge injuries, right? Like let Zalatoris get back to being the champion he is, but bank those futures numbers now. So like, if you ask me who I'm looking forward to this year, those are the types of guys I'm looking forward to. And I bet you 50%, 2 of those 4 guys are going to have great years. I mean, Cam Young be a good pick, captain's pick for Bethpage Black.
Mm-hmm.
And how many times has he played that golf course? A zillion? Yeah. Growing up in that area, right? Like, great driver, powerful player, right? You know, like all of those things. Like, and you know, Smylie, like, it takes a little extra motivation not to just go out and work every day for 8 hours a day on your golf game. Like, there's got to be a carrot at the end of the stick. That Ryder Cup's a huge carrot that's coming. And I think that those types of storylines, those are the players I'm looking forward to. You know, don't forget at the end of last year, right? Some of the guys that were in that top 10, forget Rahm because he went to live. But Patrick Cantlay's no longer in the top 10 in the world, and he was on January 1st. Hulme, Fitzpatrick, Brian Harmon, those guys were all gone, and they were replaced by Ludwig, others, right? Like, it's going to happen again.
Gala, I think, snuck in there, maybe.
Yeah.
He's close at least.
Hideki came back in the top 10, playing some of the best golf of his career. So I like to look to guys that were proven at one point, and I know that, and I think that they've been champions, so they can come back. So that's my answer to that question.
Yeah, Charlie, did you take notes on all this, or you got everything dialed in, or you feel like you're in a good spot?
We're so dialed, and I think that we might just have to get some. We either got to include Keith in the one and done this next year, or we got to go to get some front end intel. I know that's why I struggle. He's going to beat us like a drum. Yeah,
we kind of blacked out though this year.
we did.
we had a good run.
I mean, we could at least have a little chat about what's important, 100%. And then you guys can make your picks. I mean, I'll keep track of my own on the side, and we'll just see how we do.
Well, this is going to be a good reference point, Keith, for us to always kind of come back to the basics. This was a really good exercise for us, for all the folks that are listening. And we really got about halfway through this interview. There's so much more that we could have gotten into as far as previews for 2025 and the majors and those projected odds. So we're going to have to get you back on as maybe we start to see who gets off to a nice start in 2025, in which we can maybe start looking at the board and say, hey, who's going to be the next guy to jump in that top 10, or who's going to go potentially play their way onto that Ryder Cup team with some good play. So we're going to have you back on, Keith. This has been terrific. Thank you for your time, man.
Smylie, Charlie, I'm a huge fan. When I got the text to join you guys, big smile on my face. So pun intended. All right. So all good, guys. Thanks so much.
Well, you got all your listeners and all the folks that read your newsletter always with a smile on your face based on coming back with that 19% hit rate. So I'd be happy to. My bank account would be as well. So, Keith, check you next time, man. Thank you.
Take care.
I listen to this podcast. It's really cool. And
all of our local fans and subscribers, but make sure you like and subscribe.
It's cool to see what you guys are doing. I know golf fans appreciate it, but we do too. So please keep it up.
For all the good people at YouTube, like and subscribe.
You guys have some good takes, so I'm happy to come on and shoot the